All right, joining us now, he's been on the show many times, has great advice for us. He's a former Moody Bible Institute professor, currently serves as Associate Professor of Leadership at Anderson University. Welcome back, Dr. Chris Rappazini.
Hey, Brian and gang, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you bet. And, you know, we've been digging in for a bit now on your book, Moving Forward After Messing Up. I love it. And there's so many helpful things in here. As we dig in a bit deeper this time, could you remind those who weren't with us last time, kind of what's the backstory of writing this book?
Sure. So, yeah, real quickly, my brother and I are polar opposites. So I went to Bible college. I got married, have kids, was a pastor, and then a professor. My brother is the exact opposite of that. He went to college, majored in college life, moved to Colorado when Colorado changed their marijuana laws, and found a group there, ended up becoming homeless, and then got arrested. Really, all of the split started after our dad's passing when we were both teenagers. We both started on those journeys. And I realized that, wow, we both messed up. Now, he messed up publicly, he got arrested, but I messed up too, and just the relationship or the lack thereof of effort that I put into our relationship for many, many years. Fast forward, though, thankfully now, our relationship is a lot better. We're speaking on speaking terms. We speak kindly to each other. He's not a Christian yet, but we're still praying for him. And so I was looking for a book, honestly, about, hey, how as a loved one do you walk this journey with somebody? Because really we reconnected after he got into jail and he needed some help. And the only books I could find were from addicts or alcoholics who had overcome everything and now they're, keynote speakers or CEOs and, they've just made it to the top.
Yeah.
But I wondered, hey, what is it like for a loved one to walk that journey with them? And so that's the crux of the book.
Yeah, I've always found it more impactful when people minister from a place of brokenness rather than from a place of success. And it sounds like that's kind of where your heart is in this.
Yeah, and part of my background, Brian, and you know this too, is in leadership, specifically in servant leadership. And a lot of people think that servant leadership is, hey, I've made it to the top. Now I need to turn around or reach my hand down the mountain and help people up. But actually, servant leadership is the exact opposite of that. It's actually starting at the bottom and pushing or helping people up along the way, and you're on this journey together. And I feel like when it comes to discipleship, when it comes to what the Lord has called us to, that's what he wants us to do, is to walk that journey with other people, to serve alongside them. That's like what the Good Samaritan did, right? He served alongside the person on the side of the road. And I think that's what we are called to do as believers in Christ whenever we see a prodigal and we are trying to help to bring them home.
And, as a parent, it's striking to me to see how differently you and your brother responded to your dad's passing, that traumatic event. You were both raised in the same home. How do you process through how differently you both responded to that?
Brian, honestly, and I don't want to get too much into the theological terms of it and all, or, cause conflict on your show, but when I was in Bible college and they introduced us to the doctrine of election, mm-hmm. This is the one that really got me, because I realized, wow, I should be just like my brother and my sister and others in my family who are not walking with the Lord. But for some reason, the Lord put people in my path and had called me to himself. And the only thing I can think about, or the only reason I can come to, is that it has to be God who called me out of, my waywardness, my lostness, and into his family. So yeah, I think that's huge. I think also the people that I was surrounded by. I was surrounded by a youth pastor who loved me and cared for us and befriended me. He was a Moody grad. Actually, his name was Peter Dahlin, and so
I like him already.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I think that was a big issue, a big thing as well. So the people around me, but I think ultimately it's God's sovereignty.
Yeah, we haven't talked about it, but and you certainly don't have to answer this. But how do you think your mom has processed through the different paths her sons have taken? Does she blame herself in some way, do you think? Or does she see God's sovereignty at work?
That's a great question. I think she has, it's a lot of emotions. Some of it she probably blames my dad as well,
Yeah.
because of just maybe the ways that he enabled my brother growing up and was, always essentially bailed him out. And then when he passed, he was expecting that from parents, and she really didn't want to do that anymore. But yeah, I think it hit her the hardest, of course. When you see a son who's wayward, a prodigal, who's a drunk and gets arrested and curses her out. I mean, he would blister her with his words, whether it was in person or on the phone. And they had to live together for some points when he dropped out of college, and then essentially she had to kick him out of the house, which was not easy. I'm sure. He never took care of himself or anything, so it's not like he was even a good prodigal son. He was really unpleasant to be around, and yeah, I'm sure that it just tore her apart. I mean, and just broke her heart. But I think, her faithfulness has been a testimony to me as well. And just, I know she continues to pray for him. And thankfully, now their relationship has been restored because of humility, because of forgiveness on both of their parts. She's been able to, of course, communicate with him, visit him, and he's not allowed to leave the state of Colorado, but, their relationship is so much better than where it has been. And it took years. It took a lot of years.
We're talking about his real personal memoir of sorts, part memoir, part teaching, about how to move forward after messing up, where he and his brother took entirely different paths after the tragic passing of their father from cancer. And his brother went down a road of drugs and alcohol and criminal activity that just have wreaked havoc in his life. And you two didn't talk for a long time, Dr. Rappazini. What kept you from reaching out to your brother?
That's right. I think it was, well, I can answer that in two ways, right? I can answer it with the excuses or the reality. The excuses that I want to answer it by is saying, well, he rarely had his phone charged, or he kept changing his number. At times he was homeless. He was hard to get a hold of. He never called me, so why should I call him? And all those things are true, but really they're, I think, in the long run, excuses. Why? I think probably a lot of pride on my part, ego on my part, self-righteousness. Well, he should just, come clean. He should just get his act to order, and then I'll talk to him. When he can carry on a decent conversation, then I'll talk to him. But I think it was a lot of pride, ego, and yeah, I just didn't reach out to him. And sometimes it was like, well, it's been, it's already been 2 months, and so, that window, that ship has sailed, that window's closed. Maybe I can't reach out to him anymore. And so I just think of excuses after excuses, but I think it was inwardly something that I just was not dealing with, and, I needed to, because he's my brother, and he's somebody who the Lord values and the Lord loves, and so should I. And so I needed to get out of my prideful way, be humble, and reach out, pick up the phone, shoot a text message, go visit if I could. I think those are some of the reasons.
Yeah, and we live in an era where people are quick to write people off. We've talked about it on the show quite a bit recently, actually. And, it's similar things. I have to put in all the work in this relationship. They're not nice to me, blah, blah, blah. So why not just write off your brother and say, this guy's too far gone. He'll come to me when he's ready.
And yeah, I could have. And you're right. Even today, I still always initiate the calls. I take that back. He did call me on Father's Day.
Whoa.
That was really special.
That's great.
Yeah, really special. I think it was the first time in a long time he's ever called. Now, whenever I do call, he always answers the phone, and he's always wants to talk. I think, too, and I've come down to it, is hey, some people are just wired that way. I'm wired to just continually connect with people, to keep those lines of communication open. Other people are wired where they just don't like calling people, but they want to talk to people. That doesn't mean they, want to be just shut off from the world. They just, maybe they don't want to inconvenience people, so that's why they don't call people. And I don't want to inconvenience people either, but I just realized, hey, I'll just shoot a text message or a phone call, and maybe they answer, maybe they don't. And I don't get disappointed, or it doesn't wreck my day if they don't. So, yeah, I think that's one of the ways that we just continually stay connected. And I could write him off altogether, but I just think of the gospel, and I'm so glad that Jesus didn't write me off when he easily could have several times. And, the Philippians 2 just always rings in my mind, to have the mind or the attitude of Christ and to put other people first, right? Other people's interest. Philippians 2:4, each of you should look not unto your own interest, but also in the interests of others. And so I think just if you're interested in other people, you're not going to write them off.
Yeah, and I'm sure someone listening now is kind of feeling that nudge of they've got that relationship, whether it's a brother or a friend, that needs to be reconciled. What's your advice for that person and how to begin that journey?
Yeah, if you can, I would say just do it. Just reach out to them. Make today the day, and tomorrow will take care of itself. But you can do your part to reach out. I shared this last time. I shared this in the book, but I think it's worth sharing again. The passage of scripture that is the theme passage is the prodigal son story. In that story, there's actually 3 stories. There's a shepherd who loses a sheep. He leaves the 99. He searches for the lost one. There's rejoicing. There's a woman. She's got 10 coins. She loses one. She searches for it. She loses it. She searches for it. So there's rejoicing after she finds it. And then there's 2 sons. One is lost, but nobody searches for the lost son. And whose responsibility was it? It was the brother's responsibility. It was the one who was supposed to be the righteous one, the one walking with God. It was his responsibility, but he didn't do it. He was self-righteous. He was indignant towards that brother. But what was he supposed to do? What is God wanting us to do, believers in Christ, is to go after the prodigals. And so, yeah, it's hard. It's awkward. It's going to be awkward. It will be, because you haven't talked in a while, or you haven't communicated in a while, or you haven't had that tough conversation that you've always needed to have. But on the other end, just imagine what that relationship could be like. Imagine, when you talk regularly. Imagine holidays that you can spend together, vacations you can enjoy together. That's waiting on the other side of that phone call, that text message, that letter. That is possible. And I think it's possible because, hey, we've humbled ourselves. We're going to seek reconciliation, forgiveness, because we have a God who does that, right? He humbled himself. He sought reconciliation. We ask for forgiveness, and he grants it. He gives it to us.
And you bring up humility a number of times in the last few moments. And I got to tell you, even personally, that's the hardest thing to cultivate, especially when you feel like there's that imbalance, right? Like your brother should call you, but he doesn't. He maybe talks about himself all the time on the phone, and you'd want him to be interested in you. Like, you've got legitimate concerns. How do you cultivate humility in these relationships?
And you're right. Humility, I think, is really that first step. It's tearing back and getting down to the studs. I like to think of how we had a bathroom renovation about a year ago, and they had to tear out all the walls, all the tile, everything, just to get down to the studs before they can start over again. And a lot of times that's what has to happen in these relationships and when we move forward. So we gotta clean it out and get down to our humility studs. And it's only then that we can start rebuilding it. And it is hard, but I think it's putting other people first, being genuinely interested in what's going on in their lives, being grateful and having an attitude of gratitude, being selfless and having true compassion for them. And compassion, the word compassion in the Latin word is suffering together. So the passion of Christ is the suffering of Christ. Compassion, so that first word come is together. So we're suffering together with them to have true compassion. And that's at the heart of humility is, hey, I look at you and I'm suffering with you. It's having empathy with them. You guys were just talking about in that last segment about adult children and parents, and empathizing with them, acknowledging their feelings. So all of that is crucial in building those relationships. But it takes time. This is not going to happen overnight, or even, yes, it starts with a phone call or a text message or a letter, but it's going to take days, weeks, months, maybe even years. And it's hard to put others first, but when it comes to those relationships, I think it does start with humility.
Yeah, it's one of those circumstances, again, where it seems like I need to preach the gospel to myself every day, every single day. Because it's from self-righteousness that we lose sight of humility.
Yeah, if you're not preaching the gospel to yourself, and what do we mean by that? I think what it means, and you can tell me what you think it means. What I think it means is reminding myself of the gospel every day, reminding myself of what God, through Jesus Christ, the power of His Spirit, has done for me, and then me allowing me to do that for other people as well. That's what I think about when I say preach the gospel. What would you say, Brian?
Well, and to me, it's that as well. It's the mirror of my own sin. I have to be aware of the fact that I didn't deserve Christ's sacrifice on my behalf. Like, I am not somehow better than everyone else around me. I am equally deserving of hell. And from that perspective, I'm so grateful the Lord has saved me. Why couldn't I possibly have humility and compassion towards others, right? When I know that I'm a mess as well. I think as believers, as we grow in holiness, we lose sight of the fact that we still need Jesus.
Right. And I think that's the thing is it's great that we're growing in holiness, right? It's great that we're being sanctified. We're becoming more and more like Christ. But I think the interesting thing in the scriptures, I mean, you look at Isaiah, you look at, Peter, the closer they got to Christ, the more they realized of how sinful their lives were and how sinful they were and how much more they needed grace and God's love and forgiveness in their life. And so we can't lose sight of that. And yes, let's grow closer to Christ. But in the midst of that, we're going to realize, wow, I am a sinner in need of saving. And thankfully, Jesus does that for us.
Now, for those who want to kind of move forward in a new way, what are some tips you have on how to move forward after messing up, whether or not you're the prodigal or the other brother?
Well, I would say the first thing is to find people who can help you. So whether it's a support network, a group, family members who can, walk that journey alongside you. You can't go through this world alone. I mean, COVID taught us that, right? COVID taught us we need to do things in relationships and in community with other people because they're going to help you to identify those red flags, those triggers, those places, those people that you ought not be around that then send you into a downward spiral. So once you're able to do that, and then they'll also be able to, the second step, I think, goal would be to set some personal goals, a personal development plan. Where do you want your marriage to be? Where do you want this relationship to be? Where do you want your job or career, wherever you're messing up, where do you want your life to be in a year, 2 years, 6 months? And then what are you doing today to get you one step closer to tomorrow to where you want to be? So setting those personal goals would be another tip. I would say start making those amends, right, with the family members, the bridges that you've burned, because you can move forward, but you're going to have to deal with some issues that have had in the past, some of those relationships. And then finally, the last thing I would say is share your story with other people. Be vulnerable, be open and authentic, and don't be shy about sharing it because there's so many people who need to hear your story, will be blessed by hearing your story, and it will help them. I had a friend who said, man, God takes our messes and He turns them into messages. And people need to hear those messages, messages of hope, of reconciliation, of forgiveness, messages of moving forward.
Well, once again, Dr. Chris Rappazini has been our guest. He's a former Moody Bible Institute professor, currently serves as an associate professor of leadership at Anderson University. And our conversation today is truly based out of his new Moody Publishers book, Moving Forward After Messing Up, A New Future with the God of Second Chances. I highly encourage you to check out this book. Doc, if folks want more information about this, how do they get it?
Sure, you can go to, of course, Amazon, Moody Publishing, or a little bit of what I do is faithfulstepsforward.com. If you're looking for material to read in a group, we have a leader's guide. There's discussion questions at the end of each chapter, so that's really who it's written for.
Wonderful. Thanks again, my friend. Can't wait to have you back soon, okay?